Take a moment, breathe deeply. Now, imagine a grand colonial mansion in 19th century Brazil, candles flickering on the walls, laughter echoing through wide, decorated halls, the smell of roasted meat and imported wine drifting in the air to those dressed in fine clothes. It was a night of joy and abundance, but behind that shine, in the kitchens and corridors, there were people living a very different reality. People who were not guests, not even considered fully human. They were the enslaved, carrying trays, filling glasses, bowing their heads while the master celebrated. Tonight, I want to take you back to one of those evenings. The Feast of the Kings, a celebration meant to honor tradition, but also to display power and wealth. And within this feast, there was one woman whose story survived, even though her name did not. She was an enslaved cook, and during that night, she made a choice that would forever echo in history. She poisoned 12 masters. To understand her act, we must step into her world. 19th century Brazil was the largest slaveholding society in the Western Hemisphere. Over 4 million Africans have been captured, shackled, and transported across the Atlantic, torn from their families, crammed into dark holds of ships. Many died before even reaching the shores. Those who survived were sold at markets, inspected like cattle, branded, and forced to work for the rest of their lives. Slavery was not only physical labor, it was a system of dehumanization. It stripped people of their names, their languages, their spiritual traditions. Families were broken apart. Children could be sold away, never to see their mothers again. The whip was not simply a tool. It was a language of domination, a reminder each day of who held power. And yet, within this violent world, there was always resistance. Sometimes resistance took the form of uprisings and revolts. Brazil saw many of those, from quilombos, communities formed by escaped slaves, to organized rebellions in cities. But resistance also appeared in quieter ways. A stolen moment of freedom, a song whispered in an African tongue, a prayer shared secretly at night. And in some cases, resistance was hidden in the most unexpected of places, like the kitchen. So now, picture the setting more vividly. It's January, the season of the Feast of the Kings. The halls of the house are filled with guests. Music drifts through the air, violins, tambourines, voices singing. Tables groan under the weight of food, roasted pork, sugared fruits, imported wines. For the elite, it was more than celebration. It was theater, a chance to show off their wealth, to prove their influence. They laughed loudly, argued politics, and talked about trade, all while being served at every moment. But behind the spectacle were the enslaved men and women, carrying heavy trays, refilling glasses, sweeping floors, waiting to be summoned at the snap of a finger. To the masters, they were invisible, but to each other, they were human. They watched, they remembered, they endured. And among them was one woman whose eyes took in every detail that night. Her name has been lost to history, erased like so many others, but her choice was unforgettable. Imagine her standing in the kitchen, heat from the fire pressing against her skin, the air heavy with the smell of spices and smoke. She is preparing food, moving quickly, obeying commands. But inside her mind, something else is happening. Years of humiliation, years of silence, years of being treated as less than human. All of it is boiling within her. And on this night, as laughter echoes from the hall, she makes a decision. She will poison the masters. Not one, not two, but 12. Think about the courage, or perhaps the desperation that took. The knowledge that she could be caught, tortured, killed. The awareness that her act might bring swift punishment, not only on her, but on others. And yet, she chose to act. Her body was enslaved. But her will was free, and it burned. The kitchen, for enslaved women, was both a prison and a hidden arsenal. On one hand, it was a place of endless work. Hours of grinding, chopping, boiling. The fire never cooled. The demands never ceased. It was a space of exhaustion and surveillance. But on the other hand, the kitchen offered something rare: access. The food and drink of the masters passed directly through the hands of those they enslaved. And with that access came possibility. She had no weapons, no army, but she had knowledge, knowledge of herbs, roots, and powders that could sicken or kill, knowledge carried perhaps from Africa or learned quietly among others in bondage. In her hands, the simple act of seasoning became subversion. Cooking, which is usually an act of care, became an act of rebellion. That night, the kitchen was not just a space of labor. It was a battlefield, and poison was her weapon. The guests laughed, drank, and ate, and then, slowly, things began to change. A cough here, a groan there, faces turned pale, bodies slumped in chairs. Cups fell to the ground. The music faltered. 12 men fell ill. In an instant, the feast turned to chaos. Laughter was replaced with confusion, celebration with fear. Servants rushed about, not knowing what to do. Panic swept the hall. And for a fleeting moment, the balance of power shifted. The men who believed themselves untouchable, who saw themselves as masters of life and death, found themselves powerless, vulnerable, at the mercy of a woman they had never truly seen. What happened next? The truth is, we don't know. The historical records are silent. Perhaps she was discovered and punished brutally. Perhaps she was executed. Perhaps her fate was hidden, buried deliberately so that others would not be inspired to follow her example. But silence is also telling. The masters who wrote history had no interest in preserving a story that showed how fragile their power really was. A story that revealed that even in the kitchen, rebellion could be simmering. What we do know is that her act, that single night, survived in memory. It crossed generations. It became a shadow in the chronicles of slavery. Proof that resistance was everywhere, even where the masters least expected it. Now let's pause together. I want you to place yourself in her shoes. Imagine a life where every day is dictated by someone else's command, where you wake to labor, where you sleep in fear, where your body is never truly yours. Imagine living in a world where your language, your culture, your family, your very humanity are denied. What would you do if you had one chance to fight back? Her choice was radical. It was dangerous, but it was hers. And in making it, she reminded us that slavery was never only a system of submission. It was also a battlefield of countless, quiet wars, acts of defiance that might never be recorded, but which carried immense power. When we remember her, we remember not only the cruelty of slavery, but also the resilience of those who endured it. Why tell this story now? Because history is not just behind us, it lives within us. In Brazil, in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in Canada, in Australia. Every one of these nations carries scars of colonization and slavery. The stories of indigenous peoples and of enslaved Africans are often silenced, rewritten, or forgotten. But when we bring these voices back, even the voice of a woman without a name, we resist forgetting. We acknowledge that the foundations of wealth and privilege were built on suffering. And we remember that dignity has always fought to survive. For audiences today, hearing this story is not about pity. It is about truth. It is about understanding that resistance is part of human history, even in its darkest corners. Before we end, I want you to breathe deeply once more. Carry this story with you. Let it settle in your mind, not as a relic of the past, but as a living reminder. A nameless woman in a kitchen on a night of celebration dared to strike back. Her act was small in scale, perhaps, but massive in meaning. She showed that power can be challenged, even when it seems absolute. Human dignity always finds a way, always. And as we close this chapter, let's remember her not as a shadow, but as a spark that continues to burn across time, reminding us that resistance is never truly silenced.